I mean, complain to the elders. They can help you out. That's right. They're like, oh, man. You're like, look, we struggled and we got what we got. I mean, like, seriously, don't. It could get worse, guys. I'll tell you that. Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that, I'm sure. All right. Well, let's jump on in here. Let's jump on in here. So, we started on the second thought. I just read it off, and we didn't even really get into it. But the second thought, another reason why Jesus came to earth, he says, I have come that they might have life and have it abundantly. And that's from John 10 and verse 10. You remember the rest of the verse 2. The thief cometh not, but that he may steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and may have it abundantly. So it's not just a little bit, but it is overflowing. It's in abundance. We talked about that word here recently, so we won't go back over that. But in Luke 12, verse 15, it says, And he said unto them, Take heed and keep yourselves from all covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. You know, I like to read different things, and I really appreciate one of the principles that Dave Ramsey gives out. Dave Ramsey, of course, we understand that he does the whole, getting out of debt thing. You want to, get out of debt. But, people think about just that aspect of it. But when you read the book, Financial Peace, that's really only the beginning of it. And he starts talking throughout the book about investing and different things that you should do with your money. But toward the end of the book, he talks about his favorite principle. And that is the principle of sharing. And it's like, why would you want a bunch of money to just hoard? I mean, you want to do something with it. Yeah, you could go buy expensive cars and expensive houses and do all that stuff. He said, but you know what's even more fun than that is to give it to other people. And so he talks about giving. Of course, he's a religious man to some degree, at least, and so he gives as far as giving to the religious group that he's a part of. But he talks about just in general, just giving to others. That's the principle that we should be involved in, is think about that aspect of sharing. But many people don't ever get to that point. They just want more, and they want more, and they want more, and they'll take as much as they can. And then they think that the things that they have define themselves. This is what I do. This is the house that I have. This is the car that I drive. And I knew this one guy, and he had started up a business, and ultimately I think his business failed. But he was kind of a cocky guy. Have you ever met one of those? No, you've never met one of those. But he's a real cocky guy, and he bought a BMW one time, and he was showing it off to me. And I said, I told him, I said, sorry, buddy, I don't like BMWs. He's like, oh, why not? And I said, well, because it's actually an overpriced piece of junk. I don't like them. And he said, what do you mean? I was like, well, here in like a few weeks, this thing's going to break down, and it's going to cost you $700 to get it fixed. And he was like, no, it's not going to do that. And I felt bad about being so candid with him. I mean, he's my friend, but I felt bad about that. But you know what happened a few weeks later? No kidding. It was pretty much a brand new car. No kidding. It was in the shop. And I said, well, how much is it going to cost? He was like, oh, man, it's like $1,200. I was like, well, I was wrong on one thing, But yeah, oh man, I just it's a status thing for the most part when you have certain vehicles. People think about getting a Bentley or getting all these things. They're very pricey cars. I think my generation is all about the Lamborghini. You got to get a Lamborghini, and man, Lamborghinis. I don't know if you ever seen the price on those things. That's a house payment right there, is what that is. Man, And look, I guess if you have the money and you've got the abundance, whatever. But in all seriousness, people focus on those things rather than spiritual things. And man, that's just not where the Christian needs to be. The Christian doesn't need to be that at all. We don't need to be worried about what we have because we're more concerned about spiritual things. And furthermore, we need to be concerned with other people. I think that's an even bigger issue, is being concerned with other people. Not that you can't have money. I don't want anybody. Every time I bring this up, I feel like I don't want anybody to think, well, it's wrong for me to have money. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is being, spiritually responsible with what you have. That's a big thing.
Hebrews 13:16. But do not forget to do good and to share, for with such sacrifice God is well pleased.
Right. Yeah. Right, yeah. I mean, how many times is that misquoted, right?
95% of the time.
Yeah. Well, what do people say about it? The love of money is the root of all evil.
They say money's the root.
Yeah, that's right. Money's the root of it. Yeah. Sorry, I got all biblical for a second. Yeah. Thank you. So money. And it's funny because, it's the love of money, and it's the root of all kinds of evil. Not all evil. And we've talked about that before. There are certainly evil things in this world that are not represented by money. Right, yeah. And again, that's another thing is, money doesn't do what? It doesn't make you happy. Now, I will have to admit, I did see a picture one day, and someone said, money doesn't make you happy, but money buys tacos, and tacos make me happy. So, I mean, it's hard to reason with that, But yeah, no, we know that we need to be concerned more about spiritual things. And of course, I've actually met a lot of brethren over the years that were very wealthy, and the generosity that I saw from those individuals has just been amazing. I even had to, on one occasion, there was this guy, and he was, I don't know how much money. Obviously, you never asked that question, but I knew that he had millions, and he had multiple millions, and he was always doing stuff for me. And I said, "You got to stop. You got to stop because I love you, and I want to hang out with you. But if you keep giving me stuff, people are going to think that I just hang out with you, so you get me stuff. You got to stop it." But he was just so generous. He didn't think about that. He's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And so we'd go out to eat, and he would grab the check, and I go, "I think I got this one." It's okay. I'll take care of you this time. It is really. I have seen a lot of brethren that had a lot of money, and they were just very good with it, very kind and compassionate. And if anybody needed anything, I knew of a guy that just kind of like with the situation we're in, we had the baptistry was not working right. And now it was like a tiled, I don't even know how they made it, but it was like tiled all the way around to the bottom. And so I'm not sure exactly how that worked out, but it had gotten just, so corroded with calcium deposits on it that you could not see the tile in most of the places anymore. And they found out how much it was going to cost to just get everything redone, because we were, having baptisms, and people were, going, "Ow, ow," as they're walking down the steps into the baptistry. And so I was like, that's a bad sign, And, this guy did, we brought it up, and this is a small congregation, and the men were like, "We just can't do anything about it." There's this huge argument about it. This man finally was like, "Nope, stop right there. I got it. We're not going to have this argument. We need that. We should be ashamed that it's gotten into this, state as it is. So let's just hang our heads, say we're sorry, and I'll pay for this to get fixed because, it's our fault." And so he did. And, it's just, kind things like that just happen all the time with people. But outside of that, thinking about some other principles for which Gesundheit, I guess. But we have some other principles that we need to remember in having this abundant life, and that is, the very first thing is we got to follow the Good Shepherd. In John chapter 10 and verse 4, when it says, when he put forth all his own, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. So, of course, it's always fascinating. Has anybody in here ever been around sheep at all? Raise your hand. Yeah. So you've been around sheep. Have you been around someone who was the shepherd? And they literally, my father-in-law did a VBS one time, and he bought a lamb and had it follow him everywhere. He spent the night outside with it, told it what to do. He kept all of his family away from it, just to train it, basically. And he took it to get it food and water, and he just played the shepherd for a couple of weeks, and then he brought it into the church building and had it down front, and he said, he gave this passage and said, you know what, the sheep will hear the shepherd's voice. And I think he called it Fluffy just to be funny, but he had Fluffy the sheep with him, and he said, his name's Fluffy. Why don't you call Fluffy and see if Fluffy will come to you? And so all the kids started yelling, and some of the adults were calling out for Fluffy, and so the sheep wouldn't move, just stayed right where it was, not going to go anywhere. And then he told everybody to be quiet. He walked to the back of the auditorium and said, "Come on, Fluffy." You know what that lamb did? Started hopping up and going to where the shepherd was. And lots of cool things. Yeah, that's right. Knows who takes care of him. Right. And so John 10, verse 27, again, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. But a part of that is you got to know the good shepherd first. And so in verse 14 of John chapter 10, it says, I am the good shepherd. I know mine own, and mine own know me. And so again, the good shepherd has sheep that know who he is, and he knows who they are. And of course, going back and thinking about the parable of the lost sheep, you've got 99 that are accounted for, and you got the one that's lost. And how long did it take the shepherd to find the one lost? I read a book one time, and it was on the 23rd Psalm, and it was from the eyes of a shepherd. I'll have to, if you're interested in that, it's a great read. And he goes through and he explains the 23rd Psalm exactly in the context of what all of it means being a shepherd, and it's just really fascinating. But he has talked about this principle, and he said that when you're a shepherd and you're out in the field with your sheep, he said you are constantly counting. And you're looking around, and you're counting all of your sheep, making sure that they're all there. And if they're not there, you start looking for the one that's not accounted for. And so when you think about that with the Lord, wanting to make sure that we're all a part of the fold, as soon as we're gone, he knows we're gone, and he's wanting us back. And the same thing, the same principle, I think, could be even for brethren here, and I guess probably even especially for elders, I would think, but I'd say just the brethren at large. This is a good principle, and that is that as soon as one of our own is gone, what do? We need to go out and find them, go look for them, go get them back. And then last but not least, again, it's not only the responsibility of the shepherd to take care, but there is a responsibility for the sheep to be able to recognize what they're hearing. In John 10 and John 10 verses 3 and 4, to him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. When he hath put forth all his own, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And this is something different that they did at the time than really most people do. We think about sheep and their livestock, but and still in other countries they still do this. They still not only count sheep, but they name their sheep, and they know their sheep. And when their sheep go missing, they figure out who's missing. They know which one it is because they've named them all. And that's I think that's another thought here, especially when you think about some of the bigger congregations. Bigger congregation, you might feel invisible at times. But, good shepherding means that, the shepherds are going to know who is gone, and they're going to go and they're going to find that one. I like right turns. Is that better? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we're studying this physical aspect. Let's open the discussion on the spiritual aspect. Has anybody here seen Christ?
Well, through each other.
That's basically so.
Yeah.
Through faith, through pursuit, and so forth and so on. That's one of the things that in today's world makes it so difficult for Christianity and to remain faithful in Christianity. As a shepherd, which we have shepherds, that seem to the flock, but in the spiritual aspect, you can fall away real fast.
Right.
And disappear, even though you're occupied a seat.
Mm-hmm.
How do we continue as sheep following the shepherd in a spiritual aspect?
Yeah, so a part of that, really, just going back to this whole idea, just keeping in the context of this, what happened? Sheep have terrible eyesight. And it is really easy for them to veer off the path. They can actually, be around the flock, and they go over and they see a nice little patch of grass, and they'll eat that, and then they'll look over and they'll see a nice patch of grass over here, because I think their eyesight's only about like 4 feet in front of them clearly. It's very, very, very short distance. And so they can see the stuff in front of them, and they just get a little further and further away until they can turn around and there is no flock with them. And so in that aspect, it's easy for them to get separated from the flock. There are also some sheep that are very bullheaded. In chickens, you have a pecking order. With sheep, you have a butting order. And they'll start, hitting other sheep until somebody gets dominance. And there'll be some stubborn sheep that will, doesn't matter what kind of grass, and this shepherd was describing this and saying, doesn't matter what kind of good grass you lead them to. You have them in this perfect field, and they'll poke their head through that barbed wire fence and eat the dead brown grass on the other side. And he said, those sheep, you know what those sheep do? Those sheep find a way out. And they want to leave. And they find their way out. And you know what oftentimes happens is they oftentimes take others with them. And now if you can go back and you think about what we've just said, sometimes people fall away because we are the good sheep. We're the sheep and he's the good shepherd. Sometimes we can fall away by just not keeping our eyes on the prize, by not recognizing where we are, not recognizing the danger, and just doing our own little thing. And I think that's probably what's happened to a lot of people with, viewing services online. I think that's probably what's happened to many of them, that they thought, well, I'm still doing this. I'm still doing the right thing. but they have just kind of lost it. They've lost sight of things. But then there are others that literally just want to just be rebellious. And when they're rebellious, they take others with them. And so I think about that aspect. So the first one, how do we help that person out? You know, someone that has just lost sight of things, how do we help them? I'll leave this up to you now. How do we help the person that's just veered away?
Go teach them the truth.
Yeah, go and reintroduce. I actually heard somebody. I won't forget you. I actually heard somebody, a preacher, one of my teachers actually at Memphis School of Preaching. He said, I asked him one time, well, how do you go? Because like we're talking about Bible studies, and he said, well, how do you go and talk to somebody about coming back after they've fallen away? And he said, literally, I just go back and teach them like they're a new Christian. And they may say, oh, I know. But you go through the whole thing anyway, just so that they can remember. And so I thought, man, that's a pretty good thing. You just teach them like they've never even heard the gospel before because they've forgotten something. What is it that you're saying? Right. Right.
I don't know how you put this in the analogy you were using. But I think the sheep have to be smart enough to also realize if the shepherd is leading them astray. They have to be able to know that. They have to have a knowledge of it. Enough working knowledge to know if the shepherds are leading in the direction they should be going.
Yeah, I can't fit that in my analogy, but that's good. Anybody else?
Personally, I don't think we do enough following Matthew 28. Teach, baptize, and teach.
Right. I'm with you on that. I think there's a whole lot of teach and baptize, but no teach at the end. And that is something that we need to make sure that we don't do. And we need to follow up with people that are new Christians and make sure that they're getting what they need spiritually. So yeah, that's right.
Sheep like grass, sweet grass and grass.
Yeah.
The word, that sweet word, the other word.
Yeah, you got the word of God, and you have the wisdom of this world. And yeah, people oftentimes they'll get tricked in that. I think the other aspect of that, we talked about the sheep that goes and takes others with them. I just think right back to 1 Corinthians 5 with that, don't you? I mean, why is it that we enact church discipline? Well, Paul says right there, a little bit of what? Yeah, a little bit of leaven, leaveneth the whole lump. And if you allow sin, I've seen this happen. And I tell you, I don't, I try not to put up with anything when it comes to this one aspect. But, when you see sin, you got to take care of it. You got to help guide because it can go down a really bad path really quick. And then you lose your credibility when it comes to the word. You do. And I know I've said it before. I'm going to repeat it because I think it's worth repeating. And I was with a congregation, and there was a couple that they were living together. And I didn't know this. I was pretty much brand new to the congregation. And I came in, and probably within 6 months, I found out that this woman had been bringing her boyfriend. And, I've learned that people outside the church, doesn't matter even religiously who they are, they don't look at this the same way as brethren do. Because I don't know how many times I've run into this where people are like, oh, well, they're living together. I'm like, oh, that's okay. Maybe they'll get married one day or whatever. It's like no big deal. And yeah, saving money, you know. But you know, it's just it's crazy thought to me. But anyway, I was talking to this guy, and I was trying to get a Bible study with him, and he said, "Well, I need to ask, you know, my girlfriend, and see what's a good time for her is." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like I didn't understand." And he's like, "Well, she works at this time, and you know, we're like missing each other all the time." And I'm like, "What?" Like what? And then it came out somehow. He said something about them living together, and I was like, and I'm thinking, this is great. I'm a brand new preacher here, but you know what I got to do now? I got to go talk to elders and go, they're living together, and so that's what I did. And this elder. Well, the elders both said, "Yeah, basically, kind of, what are you going to do about that? You know, I mean, if we tell them that they can't do that, then they'll stop coming." And I said, "But if we don't, we're going to have a bigger problem. We're trying to protect everybody else." And we had this long. It was probably about half an hour, just back and forth between me and my new elders. And I'm going, we got to do something. And so I lost that one. And I was filled with righteous indignation. And I said, mark my words, this is going to come back to bite you. And I'm going to look at you. And I don't normally feel this way, but I'm going to look at you in that day. I'm going to point at you and say, I told you so. And I want you to remember this right now, because I'm guaranteeing that this is going to be a problem. And you know what happened about a year later? Somebody else did the same thing. And then they started to talk to this person. You know what they did? Well, nobody talked to them. And they were doing that, which I didn't even know that they would have known. And so, you know what I did is I went to the elders and I said, I am sorry to have to remind you of this, but I told you that this would happen. And so they dealt with that problem, and then they retroactively had to deal with the other problem. And then they had to apologize to the congregation for not having dealt with the first problem. And I thought, and we had a heart-to-heart, because they came back and they apologized to me. And I said, you know what? It would have been just easier from the very beginning if this was just handled. You wouldn't have had to get up and apologize. We probably even wouldn't have had this second problem if we had just, taken care of this right from the beginning. I could have gotten up in the pulpit and just publicly supported your actions with the scriptures. This could have been done. They didn't learn their lesson because something else happened just like that. It was just a different scenario. And it was more sin. And I said, you got to deal with this. And if you don't deal with this, you're going to have more problems. And you know what? I just was done at that point. I couldn't help them out any further. But guess what happened? There was sin. They didn't deal with sin. And it came up again. Yeah, I've heard things like that for sure. That's right. Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say things like that. Oh, I'm not really tempted by that, and they're doing it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it's kind of like that whole, when someone's smoking and they're like, I can quit any time. Why don't you quit? Because I don't want to. And yeah, it is interesting. Anybody else have any comments before we move on to the next one? We just plowed that one into the ground. Anybody else anybody have a sheep story you want to share? I don't know. All right, let's move on to the next thing. The Son of Man did not come to be served. Now, this one in particular is very interesting when you think about the context in which it's given. And so in Matthew 20 and verse 28, even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. In Mark 9 and verse 1, now hold on to Matthew 20. We'll be back to Matthew 20. And Mark 9 and verse 1 says, And he said unto them, Verily I say unto you, there are some here of them that stand by, who shall in no wise taste of death, till they shall see the kingdom of God come with power. And of course, at this time, you're thinking about, what is it that they thought? We talked about this before. What have they thought about Jesus? And as far as a reign, he's supposed to be a king, but what kind of king? Yeah, they oftentimes mistook that. Now, when you think about that, keeping in the context that many people thought that Jesus would have this earthly reign, and then he says, I came to serve. Well, that's a big difference in what they were thinking. I mean, because what happens with a king? I was listening to a podcast. I listened to some historical podcasts, and there was literally a guy that was paid, and I cannot remember which king it was. This a few weeks back that I heard this. But there was a king who, I guess we'll just say, needed assistance in the bathroom. And so he had a servant that literally just followed him to the bathroom. And I think it was mostly for company. I don't know. It was weird. They read stuff to him while he was sitting on the throne, I guess. But, he was, trying to do business while obviously he's multitasking, yes. And I think about that, and as soon as I heard that, I thought, you know what? When you become that servant, you got to go, maybe life isn't worth living anymore. I don't know. And I was just like, this is terrible. Somebody had that job. And if you think about all throughout time, there have been really weird jobs given to people to serve a king. I mean, even in the Bible, they had people that, the cupbearer. What was the cupbearer's job? What was that? Nehemiah. Yeah, Nehemiah. Right. What was the cupbearer's job to do?
Be like a taste tester.
And why would you taste test the kings? Yeah. So guess who's first on the hit list? That's the cupbearer. There's everything. There's all kinds of jobs, and all these people serve this higher power. But Jesus comes, and he's not wanting to be served. He is wanting to serve. Let's look at Matthew 20. We got a few minutes here. Matthew 20, starting in verse 20, it says, Then came to him the mother of the sons of Zebedee with her sons, worshiping him, and asking a certain thing of him. And he said unto her, What wouldest thou? She saith unto him, Command that these my two sons may sit, one on thy right hand, and one on thy left hand in thy kingdom. But Jesus answered and said, You know not what ye ask. Are ye able to drink of the cup that I am about to drink? They said unto him, We are able. He saith unto them, My cup indeed ye shall drink. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it is for them for whom it hath been prepared of my Father. So, here it is. What are we still looking at? We're still looking at the idea of, this physical reign and things. And so he says here, and when the 10 heard it, actually, sorry, let me back up. He saith unto them, My cup indeed ye shall drink, but some my right hand, my left is not mine to give, but it is for them for whom it hath been prepared of my Father. And when the 10 heard it, they were moved with indignation concerning the two brethren. But Jesus called them unto him and said, Ye know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Not so shall it be among you, but whosoever shall be great among you shall be your minister, and whosoever would be first among you shall be your servant, even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. So going back into this, and I like to bring this up because there are some things that are going on today in certain parts of the country when it comes to the Lord's church. You have a program where these young Christians and sometimes non-Christians are participating in competing in acts of worship. And they are competing to see who's the best song leader. They're competing to see who can do the best sermon. They're competing on, I've always thought was funny. They don't compete in prayer. Why? Because, you're talking to God. Like, what in the world? What are you doing all these other times? What are you supposed to be doing? So anyway, it's a weird thought process. But anyway, and when people ask me, because sometimes I'll get a call and say, well, what do you think about this? I bring them right here. And what did they say? What did Jesus say to them? They're basically trying to see, who is going to be the greatest among them. And you look at other passages, it becomes even clearer. But they're looking to see who's the greatest. And Jesus says, "You want to know who's the greatest? The greatest among you will be the servant." And when I've talked to these people, I've talked to some of the guys that are in charge of that thing, and I've said, it'd be great if you taught these young men to lead, and then you came together, and we just had song services and these young men getting up and preaching. How encouraging would that be to the church, just to hear all these lessons from young men? Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So that's something to be involved in, is training your young people to lead and worship. What was that? I guess it was my great uncle. But yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Probably not many. I know it's not. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we need to be involved in teaching for sure, and that's what I think is sorely lacking. We've been, I know that I've been a part of teaching and training young men to lead singing and to pray and to preach, and even gone through and shown here's how in general you do the Lord's Supper. This is what you need to say for the prayers, and this is the order it goes in, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we need to be involved in that. Does anybody have any other comments before we